When people are talking about hormones, they're often not really talking about hormones. Things like cortisol, serotonin, dopamine, testosterone are kind of buzzwords and can often be a way of sounding scientific when you're talking about things that aren't actually very scientific. Because we love science so much, or at least we love the idea of science so much, often people put a lot more trust in the kinds of medicalized, scientificized words than maybe when you're talking about things on a psychological or just a human action behavioral level. And the problem with that is that we don't often have access to the scientific medical levels that we're really talking about. And so we do things like we buy blood kits, or we go on special diets, or we get a continuous glucose monitor because we think somehow that's going to track more accurately the actual medical hormone so that we can get some testosterone replacement or track our cortisol levels or look at our blood sugar levels. When in reality, we don't really care about things at that level. What we care about is how we feel, what we're doing on a day-to-day basis, and whether what we're doing is getting us what we want. So instead of medicalizing things that can be tracked at a behavioral level, and instead of turning ourselves into a scientific experiment where we're trying to keep track of numbers that are actually only tangentially related to the thing that we care about, I think it's a lot more important to talk about things at that behavioral level and not stress ourselves out thinking we have to get lab results for things that we can solve and keep track of just by being mindful about what we're doing on a day-to-day basis. So I'm not going to go through every single hormone, but I'm going to talk specifically just about cortisol, just as an example to show you what I mean. People say that cortisol is the stress hormone. Now, that's not entirely true, because cortisol gets released when you're not stressed. And the word stress is really loaded with a lot of other associations that have nothing to do with anything that cortisol does in the body. What cortisol does is it releases energy from your fat and puts it into the bloodstream. So it serves an absolutely vital role in making your body work the way it's meant to work. And it's not very easy on a minute by minute or even day by day basis to measure in an accurate way what your levels of cortisol are, unless you want to do blood draws and do lab tests all the time. So instead of even talking about cortisol and talking about the stress hormone or talking about whether you need to be eating this or that food or managing this or that marker in your blood, let's talk about what we're really talking about here, which is stress, a physical response to a behavioral and a psychological reality. So let's just talk about the reality and the experience we're having. Sometimes there's too much going on and you're stressed. Sometimes there's not enough going on and you're bored. Sometimes there's just the right amount going on, and when that's happening, you need a certain amount of energy in your body to do that thing, and you need that energy to be available so you can use it. So when there's just the right amount of stuff going on in your life, cortisol releases energy so that you can do those things. When there's too much going on, cortisol is still releasing energy so you can do all of those things, but a bunch of other processes in your body aren't going to keep up, and we become tired, we become agitated, we become unable to recover, and we become overwhelmed, and we experience capital S stress. Too much going on is basically all it comes down to. Not enough chance to rest, being overwhelmed. So rather than talking about cortisol levels, have a look at how much you're doing and whether it's too much for you. And the way you'll know that isn't by tracking cortisol. It's by reflecting and thinking, am I doing too much? Every process in your body can be thought of in this way. Human beings are very good at handling a certain amount of stuff. There comes a point where it's too much, and there also comes a point where there's not enough. And when there's just the right amount, human beings thrive, grow, get better. And you do not need to track any hormone or pay attention to the scientific lab level medical explanations for what's going on. The same is true for your testosterone levels, the same is true for your serotonin levels, the same is true for your dopamine levels. All of these hormone profile type questions are downstream of behaviors you can manage at a day by day, just human level. And remember, the answer to every question is to stop asking questions until you're doing things in the real world. And real life isn't a lab where we can track every individual variable. The real world is something you can experience and just be mindful of and reflect on how it's going. And if it feels like it's heading in the right direction, then you can keep going on your merry way. But if it feels like it's not going in the right direction, you can kind of check in, pause, reflect, and ask some questions. What can I change? What's going on? What do I need to do differently in order to not feel like things are going in the wrong direction? And if you come up with a specific problem or there's an answer that you need in order to move forwards, please send your questions my way and I'll see if I can give a good answer in a post like this. See ya.